She said she wouldn't come.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, December 21st, and this is the Moscow City Council regular meeting. I know I will start off with John.
Would you all rise and join me in pledge allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next thing, item number 1, is the consent agenda.
Your Honor,
Dan?
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second him.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan and a second by Art to approve the consent agenda. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 And aye.
Okay. We will move on to staff recognition report. Gary, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. We don't have a staff recognition report tonight, but Dwight Curtis would like to make a presentation to you, if that's permissible.
Okay. Come on up, Dwight.
All right, well, thank you. The school district, as well as the city of Moscow, both have received from the Idaho Recreation and Park Association a Citation of Merit Award, and it's for organizations. And in particular, this one was in regards to the new community playfields. But it wasn't because we had the project. It was what they were impressed with was the cooperative nature of this thing between the city and the school district, and to come up with such a project like that. And for this particular kind of award, that's what they look for. So they awarded this back in October when I attended a conference, and I presented the school district's side of this last week, and tonight this is for you guys. And with that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You need a picture? Thank you, Dwight. Okay.
Not the first time that's happened.
Well, the neat thing about this, too, is you had talked about collaboration, working together. With this project on the ball fields, the city really couldn't have done it by themselves, nor could the schools. So working together on things to get something accomplished for the community is a big deal for all of us. So I'm going to take this up and start with Walter and let them look at it, and we'll get it over there on the desk, and you can pick it up after a while. How's that sound? Thanks, Dwight.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3 is mayor's appointments, and I have in front of the council Louisa Garden for the Human Rights Commission, which will expire 12/31/2016. This is a high school seat that's non-voting for the Human Rights Commission.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to make that appointment.
I'll second.
Okay. Wayne made the motion to approve Louisa Garden for the Human Rights Commission. John Weber seconded that. I'll start to roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. And I do not see Louisa out in our crowd, so I will move on. We would sure love to recognize her. And I always appreciate it and really thank high school kids that step forward and get involved on various commissions in our city, because it's a neat thing for not only us, but for them, too, to get that kind of work underneath their belt as they're going through life as young adults. So I think that's a pretty big deal for us. Okay, we will move on to item number 4, which is public comment, mayor's response period. Anybody can get up and speak before us as long as it's not something on the agenda tonight or something in front of the Board of Adjustments or Planning and Zoning. So I would open it up for anybody that would like to come up and say anything. And with that, I see nobody racing up here to the podium, so I'll close that off, and I will move to item number 5, which is the Cooperative Agreement 88 ramps. Les McDonald will present to us. Les?
Good evening, Mayor Lambert, members of the council. The item before us this evening is a cooperative agreement and associated resolution for the next round of ITD ADA ramp improvement projects. This is a continuation of a series of projects that the city has undertaken over the last 4 or 5 years. It is a program that is administered through the Idaho Transportation Department, meant to improve ramps, pedestrian ramps, curb ramps, access ramps, if you will, located along state highways that pass through the city of Moscow in this case. And the city has undertaken 4 of these projects previously and would like to continue to move forward in the similar effort. So I will take you through a little bit of what this project is for this particular year. There we go. It's now alive. In the past, we had, as I mentioned, 3 previous projects, I should say, not 4. The first 2 of those in 2013 and 2014 were both constructed in the 2014 summer season, consisting of 24 ramps throughout the system passing through the city of Moscow. In 2015, we did our 3rd project, which constructed 9 ramps. And what is proposed for 2016 is a project that constructs 6 ramps. You may notice the declining number of ramps per year. This is not due to the fact that there are fewer ramps to do or a decrease in funding, but the fact that now we're tackling ramps that are harder to do and more expensive to construct. So they become more challenging as we go along. We are trying to do the high priority ramps on the system, and there's a number of those that have real interesting challenges with respect to objects that are near them, grade problems, walls in the way, poles in the way, things like that require a more expensive version of construction, thus the reducing declining number of ramps that you see for 2016. Give you a quick overview of the locations. These ramps are all going to be on the Washington side of the couplet, so the northbound US 95 State 8 section. This is Gritman Hospital located here. Give you a general idea. Their entrance to their parking lot in the front in the medical complex, 7th Street, 6th Street to the north, and we'll zoom in on these a bit to give you some detail in a moment. But the first is a list of those locations. As you can see where they are in terms of US 95, they're all numbered and what intersection they're located at, 6th and Washington. These are all high priority ramps, so we're working our way through the high ramps first. Eventually we'll get through those and move on to mid and lower priority ramps, assuming the funding allows us to continue doing these projects. Overall cost estimate for this project for these ramps, you can see the individual amounts per intersection. Again, these are becoming fairly expensive on a per ramp basis, probably double or even triple what we'd see at a more traditional corner on a residential street, for instance. And that is just the nature of the extent of the work that has to be done to make these compliant. Rough total of the project then for construction is just about $60,000, which fortunately happens to be the upper limit of the grants that are provided on a yearly basis. $60,000 for construction, with the design work being done in-house in our engineering division staff as a in-kind match for the grant itself. This is the way we've been doing these since the beginning of the program. So to give you a little detail on locations, again, Washington and 6th Street, so these would be the 2 on the north end. We're looking at the 2 ramps on the east side of the intersection. You can see here they kind of continue on a little distance in each direction, and we are going to a curb bulb style where we actually bring the curb line away from its current location, bring it out further into the roadway in these locations. The primary reason for this is there are enough obstructions around here that we can't get the grades on the sidewalks to work and be compliant with the American with Disabilities Act ADA requirements unless we give ourselves more room. And creating curb bulbs gives us that horizontal space that we need to make all those grades work. It also serves as a side benefit to shorten the length of the crosswalks across the highway in these locations. Gives a little better visibility for the pedestrians in terms of the vehicles that are traveling northbound along the highway, seeing them around parked cars as they're out a little closer to the travel lane itself. So those are the two at 6th Street. Some pictures of what's out there today. This is the northeast corner. You can see we have this big wall in here and the traffic signal pole. So those are and a whole bunch of vaults. I think those are mostly fiber vaults. So these are some of the types of obstacles we have to work around when we redesign this particular corner. A question.
Les, how old is that current ramp?
That current ramp is probably less than 10 years old.
But
And at
right
the
now,
time-
it doesn't meet ADA requirements.
At the time, it was compliant. Under the new regulations, it is no longer compliant.
I've noticed a lot of those that are probably around that age that we've had to.
And ITD did these as part of the intersection when they redid the 6th Street intersection a few years ago and the 3rd Street intersection. So, yeah, they're not that old, but under the new regulations, they're no longer compliant.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate because there are a lot of older ramps in the system that really are non-compliant
Right.
that we'd like to be able to do. This particular program, of course, is limited to the highway system and what are high priorities. So a ramp like this, it's not compliant, but it's not drastically out of compliance. Others in the system, of course, need more attention, but the money is limited in where we can use it.
Yeah,
And that brings up a real good point, Les, because a lot of folks in our community don't understand that or know that, and they'll say, well, why? Geez, that looks like a real nice ramp. Why would you fool with that when you got one over here on this street that is really outdated? And folks just don't know that.
Yeah, and that's why. That is why. The other corner, so the southeast corner, looking south, again, poles here, a lot of vaults in this area, vegetation, and all that around the area. Fairly narrow sidewalks down here. So again, coming out with curb bulbs, and this gives us more space to make the grades work and fit everything in that we need to fit. Next site would be at 7th Street, again on the east side of the roadway, similar treatment, again doing curb bulbs that come out to, in essence, the edge of the parking lane in both cases along the Washington frontage, giving us more space to make room for the grades that we need and the landings that are required. Some pictures there, again, on the northeast corner of the intersection.
See, that's more like it.
Yep.
As far
And
as
again,
what I
this
would
is-
like to see replaced.
This is an intersection that was not redone by ATD in the last decade, so this, would be more of the old style, definitely non-compliant. These are the ones we really do like to replace.
Right.
So it's good that we're able to do these two, I believe, are both in these kind of conditions.
Yep, there's some.
Again, restrictions, with the existing walls that really limit what we've got for space to
Les,
work.
you may
Yes.
have said, and I didn't hear, when were those current ADA curb ramps built on 6th Street? What year were those?
It was within the last 10 years. It's when ITD came through and did the intersections. I can't remember if it was like 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in that time frame, but less than a decade.
2007 or 8 is what
Yeah,
I think
I
it
think
was.
so.
ITD paid for those?
Yes. And now they'll pay for these as well.
So with that bulb out that's getting built there, will we gain a parking place here? Or is it, we still have to have the site distance? Is that the issue there?
I think that one's primarily for site distance. I can't give you all the history on that one, but I suspect with this location, that is a site distance need, is why that parking is stripped back like that. We would not anticipate gaining parking here.
But if you,
Go ahead, Walt.
but if you bulb it out, you wouldn't need as much sight distance as you would standing up on that curb there. would
For
you?
the pedestrians, that's true. For the vehicle that's sitting here at 7th Street, you still need that site distance.
Go back a slide, though.
Now, this is looking north.
Would we gain one on that end because, or do we have a driveway?
There's a
up there?
driveway right
Okay.
there, so I don't know that we could necessarily.
Wouldn't be enough
Because you're not
fit
worried
one there.
about sight that direction.
Not that direction, unless there was an issue with the driveway site distance. We don't have a lot of driveways on this stretch. That's something we could certainly look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. The last locations are at 8th Street on the northeast quadrant, again, using the bulb-out technique, and in this case, a double ramp system. And we do have a ramp on this side, so we would be matching with that ramp on the west side. And then the location down here, this is actually the entrance, the driveway into the Gritman, south end of the hospital and north end of the parking lot. And so the ramp is actually at in essence, a driveway entrance. Looks like a street, but it is a driveway in this case. That's the one at the northeast quadrant, again, constrained by retaining walls, power poles, those types of things, which again is why the curb bulb helps. I see we have parking up close this time, not so much an issue. And the one on the other side looking north at the emergency entrance in Washington here. So a big, flat, wide area, you wouldn't think it would be too much of a problem, but it's certainly missing the tactile warning surfaces that are required on today's standards, and I think there's probably some cross-slope grades here that are too severe.
What's the price of that one?
I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well, let's go back and take a peek. It'd be $63.50. Yeah, the lowest price of all of them, because they didn't have the restrictions.
Okay, if you don't mind, if it's okay, Mayor, if you don't mind going back to the picture again. So your belief is that you're going to take out everything this side of the fire plug bollards and rebuild it? All because it doesn't have the tack strips?
Well, and again,
might be slightly off the slope?
I believe the grades are probably off on this one as well. And when it comes to ADA ramps, slightly is a huge word, because when they say 2% max, it is 2.00% max. You don't get 2.02 or 2.1. It's amazingly strict there. So just looking at it, and I don't know all the details on this one, but just looking at that, I wouldn't be surprised if we've got some great problems
right up there, about
across here.
4 or 5 feet. Mm-hmm. Jim, did you have a?
Yeah, well, go back to the one on 7th Street, if you would, Les. The other one.
8th.
That
North
one
or
there.
south? That one?
The pitch of the sidewalk after you get on off the ramp is way too steep for ADA, right?
Well, it's
you can
interesting.
Get over there, but then you can't go up.
Coming down
Once
here,
you get away
bucking back.
once you get away from the ramps,
Pave to have
the
that
rules
little
change.
street fixed.
Okay, once you get away from the ramp itself, the rules change, because then you're following the grade line of the street, and that may exceed what you'd normally see for an ADA ramp or an ADA route of travel. You can go steeper than those if that's following the grade of the center line of the street. So the way they deal with the transitions is they say, okay, down here in the ramp itself, you got to meet the requirements, 2%, you got to have the 4x4 landing, all those types of things. And then if you go 10 feet off of those points and then intercept whatever grade is there, from that point on, you just go with whatever grade is necessary to follow the road. That's how they dealt with that transition. Otherwise, you'd have 2% slopes on 10% streets, and you'd have zigzags all the way up the hill. So that's the way they've approached it in the field. So that was the last of the ramps. What's before you then this evening would be approval of the cooperative agreement that is in your package. This is an agreement that is consistent with those that we've done the past 3 projects, been reviewed by our legal department, and then also the actual resolution, which is the one that says, yes, we've approved the agreement and we authorize the project moving forward. Is that any questions that you might have?
Wayne, this was before Public Works and Finance on December 14th.
It was, Bill, and Elisa presented that pretty much in the same manner that Les did. It's kind of the opinion of the Public Works and Finance Committee was it's something that's necessary, it's something that we have to do, and it's grant money with some match, which is important to do. It's kind of unfortunate that we have to take out some things that look like they're so close, but we have to spend $6,000 to make them exactly right, but that's just the way it is. And so Public Works and Finance recommended approval and said we'd send it to full council for approval.
Okay. John?
I'd make a motion to approve the cooperative agreement for project number A01919724 for 6 ADA ramps in the city of Moscow, and then the corresponding resolution key number 19724, and move ahead with this project.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion by John and a second by Jim to recommend approval of the cooperative agreement, project number A019724 FY17, City of Moscow 688 ramps, Slayta County, key number 19724. With that, I will start to roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, we will move on. Thank you, Les. We will move on to item number 6, analysis of impedance impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan presentation. Becky,
If I may,
Did you have something else?
should there be a resolution number attached to that?
we don't.
22?
There's no, only ordinances. Is there? I mean,
No, it was a resolution.
I understand there's a
number
resolution,
don't-
but
Yeah, the resolution is required by ITD to accept the grant.
okay.
It was
Well,
part of John's motion.
2015 dash something, 22,
22,
12,
22.
22. Okay. The resolution doesn't have to be voted on, though. Just it's already part of the motion.
It was part of the motion.
Yeah. Thank you, Les,
Thank you.
for clarification. Becky, you have the podium now. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. As the liaison to the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, I'm here tonight to present to you the updated City of Moscow analysis of impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan. And I just want to take a moment to introduce our commission chair, Randy Bocall. He has a little bit of a hoarse voice tonight, so he won't be up to speak to you, but he's here to support this plan being adopted. So the purpose of this plan is really to document Moscow's efforts for promoting fair housing in our community. And the document is twofold. It first describes the process that the Commission went through to analyze our community's housing practices, policies, procedures, and plans that we currently have to see if there's any existing impediments to the provision of fair housing. And then the second part is to document action items that the Commission created to address any of those identified impediments. And this enables the Fair Housing Commission to direct their efforts for the next couple of years. Additionally, the document will fulfill requirements of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. HUD requires grantees of the Community Development Block Grant Program to certify that they will affirmatively promote fair housing by preparing an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, implement actions, and maintain records of relevant actions taken. The CDBG program works to ensure decent, affordable housing, provides services to the most vulnerable in our communities, and creates jobs through expansion and retention of businesses. So having said that, Moscow is not an entitlement city for CDBG funds due to our population, which is less than 50,000. But we can receive CDBG funds that are administered through the state, and this document can assist Moscow in being a good candidate for those funds. A little bit of background: the City Council established the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission in 1998, and the Commission is empowered to review the city's analysis of impediments document on an annual basis and make recommendations to the Council for amendments or changes to the plan. Here's the current makeup of the Commission. We have 7 members that assisted in the preparation of this document, and we will be losing one of those at the end of this year, so we will have 4 vacancies going into the new year. The first City of Moscow analysis of impediments document was adopted in 2003 with an addendum in 2005, so there has not been an update made since 2005. And the work began on this updated plan in 2013. That work involved contracting with the University of Idaho Geography Department to conduct a mailed survey to assist us in identifying any impediments within the private sector. And then the Commission co-sponsored 3 different events to learn from citizens any issues that they're having with fair housing in our community. So those involved co-sponsoring a social justice forum with the Human Rights Commission, the fair housing training with the Intermountain Fair Housing Council, and a co-sponsoring tenant and landlord workshops on the University of Idaho campus with ASUI. And then in addition, the Commission reviewed all city codes, policies, and plans, again, to just see if there was any existing impediments within those documents. The survey that I mentioned that the U of I assisted us with was conducted in March of 2014. There were 400 surveys that were mailed and 87 that were completed and returned, and that provided a 22% response rate. Then we emailed the survey to 1,995 students, and we had just 68 emailed online surveys completed, which was a 3% response for the online survey. So combining those together, the overall response rate was just 6%, which really was not a valid response for the survey. Of those who did respond, we had a very, very little diversity in terms of race, nationality, and sexual orientation. The survey included demographic questions, income questions, household and familial status, and then collected data on renters versus homeowners separately, and students as well. And the respondents ranked factors that limit their choice and influence their choice of housing in Moscow. There were no major impediments or forms of discrimination as prohibited by the Fair Housing Act that were made apparent from the survey results. There was an identified perception of housing discrimination among respondents who indicated that they have never personally felt discriminated against. And so 21% of the respondents indicated that they think there's a housing discrimination problem in Moscow, but when asked if they personally have been discriminated against, they said no. And then there was a perception of income discrimination that came out of the results, and that being that the most significant limiting factor for the choice of housing was income. And it appeared that there was a rent-to-income ratio that reaches the housing cost burden levels for 55% of the responding renters. Due to the low response rate and the lack of diversity among the respondents, it doesn't really allow for any strong general conclusions regarding the presence of discrimination in our community, and the housing cost burden levels, it's hard to strongly say that that's a real concern due to our lack of response. But, we still learned some things, so I don't want to say it's completely useless, but it just doesn't allow for some real strong concerns about discrimination. So as I mentioned, the second part of the document is the action plan. The Commission came up with 6 action items that make up that plan. The action items either address existing impediments that were identified, or they will help to encourage the provision and maintenance of affordable housing. And the goal is for the Commission to address the action items within the next 3 years. So the first action item comes from review of the comprehensive plan, and it involves research and development of appropriate programs and partnership opportunities that will assist in the provision of affordable housing as suggested in the comp plan currently. So that might involve policies or programs that will encourage the maintenance of affordable housing when sold, funding construction and rehabilitation through trust funds, third-party arrangements, land trusts that would help reduce the purchase price of home ownership. And this research should advise on potential levels of access for programs in Moscow, and also look at other municipalities and programs that they have in place. Action item number 2 comes from review of the zoning code. It involves amending the non-conforming section that currently, so that it would allow for reconstruction of a non-conforming structure as it existed prior to destruction. So currently, a non-conforming structure, if it is to be destroyed to an extent of more than 70% of the structure value, it can only be rebuilt in conformance with the code. So that can sometimes result in challenges with financing and the provision of affordable housing. The third action item also comes from the zoning code and involves amending the definition of a daycare facility so that it no longer includes foster homes. Including foster homes in that definition subjects them to zoning and location limitations, and that could potentially violate the Fair Housing Act. This action item actually was an item within the 2003 analysis of impediments document, but there was never any action taken on it, so the Commission wanted to keep that one. The fourth action item just involves some educational materials for increasing awareness of the State of Idaho affordable housing tax credit programs. So creating some educational materials, learning more about those programs, and then distributing them where possible. And the fifth action item is to conduct a survey of private sector professionals to learn more about training needs in our community and where better information dissemination is needed. This comes from the 2003 analysis of impediments document. There was a lengthy description of a survey that was conducted of all private sector housing professionals, and to learn from them what kind of training they needed, or what could help them, what kind of training they could use to better help them provide services in accordance with the Fair Housing Act. And so that hasn't been done since 2001, so it was the Commission's thoughts to update that survey. And the sixth action item involves, again, more training promoting educational opportunities for housing providers, and this just involves continuing our annual and biennial training sessions with the Intermountain Fair Housing Council and also the tenant landlord information sessions that they've been holding on campus. Towards the end of the document, there's a section on fair housing enforcement. So we updated this data, got some data from the Idaho Fair Housing Council, and just some background on them. They were established in 1996, and what they do is they provide education and outreach. They receive and investigate complaints from citizens about fair housing issues, and then they refer complaints to HUD for further investigation and possible litigation. From 2009 to 2015, the Fair Housing Council received 80 calls from Moscow residents. 55 of those calls were considered jurisdictional cases, which means that they met the criteria to be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And 49 of those 55 cases pertain to rental housing, so the majority is rental housing, not ownership. Others, a few were design and construction related, and then a few were related to the sale or purchase of a home. And most of the issues were disability accommodation related, with a few familial status, race, national origin issues. And then so when complaints are received by the Intermountain Fair or the Idaho Fair Housing Council, some of those are passed on then to the state HUD office. And 350 cases were filed with HUD for the state of Idaho for about that same time period, 2010 to 2015. 10 of those came from the city of Moscow, so 2.8% of the total cases. Half of those, so 5 of those cases, were regarding failure to make reasonable accommodations for a disability. So again, kind of the majority is dealing with disability accommodations. And the other half were a mix of discrimination cases based on familial status, race or color, and discriminatory advertising. So just a little bit of data to show where Moscow stands in regard to complaints, fair housing related complaints. Regarding our public input process for the draft plan, we presented it at the Fair Housing Commission meeting on November 5th. We released a press release and it established a public comment period for the month of November from the 5th to December 4th. We've received just 2 comments during that time. Those comments were changes were implemented in the plan, and the complete draft was available on the city's webpage during that time. So now we are at the City Council review, and tonight we're requesting adoption of the analysis of impediments and fair housing action plan. And I failed to include the resolution in your packet, but I did put it there before you before the meeting. So we're asking for adoption of that resolution as well.
Okay, Wayne, this was in Public Works and Finance as well on the 14th.
Did. Becky presented that to us last Monday, and I thought it was quite interesting. There was a couple of things that, one thing that those of us who have been on planning and zoning, we've always been a little bit concerned about, and that is that non-conforming structures with 70% damage not being able to rebuild by right if they're not within the proper zoning area. And a prime example of that is if somebody owns a duplex and that it had been zoned R3 and now it's zoned R2, when you can't have multiple family housing and it burns down or it has 70% damage, they couldn't rebuild it. So that's something that bears discussion. I don't know what the solution is, but there's something that should be done there. And then also, I wasn't even aware that your action item number 3, which a daycare facility, that foster homes fall within that category too. And I was kind of surprised about that. So I think all of these, we felt that all of these bear discussion and looking into them a little bit further.
John had a point.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that there were 10 complaints, 5 of them and 5 of them. After reading this, I have no idea what the end result of those complaints were.
Yeah, well, in the document, I thought that I had talked about how many of those were conciliated or not. The majority of those have been conciliated by the state HUD office. There's maybe 2, I think, that were still ongoing, being handled. But really, I just put the data out there just to show who handles complaints about fair housing, and then kind of what Moscow looks like with their complaint numbers.
We don't know.
Other questions for Becky? And I'm guessing this is Resolution 2015-23. Is that correct?
Your Honor,
Dan?
I would make a motion that we adopt this analysis of impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan and the accompanying resolution.
I second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan and a second by Art to recommend adoption of the analysis to the Fair and Affordable Housing Action Plan and to also approve Resolution 2015-23. I'll start the roll, John.
Aye.
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 And I,
Okay, thank you, Becky,
Thank you.
very much. And Randy, I hope your voice gets better. Happy holidays to you, so you can spread some joy around here in a few days before Christmas. Thank you for coming in. Okay, we will move on to item number 7, City of Moscow's Facilities Master Plan 2015 by Dwight Curtis. Dwight, how are you doing tonight?
Good, thank
We got this now, everybody's got their packet in front of them. They're
Big plan.
So, I think we're ready for discussion.
that read, didn't you?
I did.
All right, well, thank you. This is what you've seen before. For the most part, this is what you had at the workshop as well back in September. We presented this last week. I did make a few modifications from last week, had a little clarification, things that we needed to take care of. I'll address those as we get to them. But overall substance, it's mostly the same. The project background, of course you can see where while the city population has increased 28% since 1990, and of course the incorporated area has increased 29, almost 30%. Growth continues, and of course with that we expect government services to increase, and with that of course you have your facilities and they age. You start to have more staff, they overcrowd, and deterioration. And we expect this situation to become more acute as time goes by. And the master plan was developed to contend with this. And it's not only to solve the current issues that we might have, but also the future issues. And the goals and intent of this, to validate and upgrade, integrate. I'm sorry, it's getting late already. Integrate the selected findings, and of course count for the city's growth and estimate our current and future buildings and space needs, and document to aid the city in our budgeting and scheduling and administration of these projects through our current and new CIPs, and assure the future projects are planned in conjunction with the plan, the 20-year facilities vision plan. The intent is to provide an analysis of all city facilities to determine which ones the city should retain and dispose of. And as you saw in your packet, there is some of that. Facility retainage, the forecast of our growth, our staff growth, as well as our space needs, and what sequencing we would need with that. The caveats of this particular plan, as you know, this has been going on for, basically 3 years now. Through that, we've had different authors. We've had different just fixes to this, different approaches to it. There could be some confusion regarding the full-time employee numbers, as even part-time staff, seasonal staff take space, so they had to be included in this. And also, this document is based on needs, and it's understood that the realities of funding can dictate the constraints of where we go in the future with this. The team involved LCA architects and DSA out of Boise, as well as some the elected officials and city staff. And the scope of the project was analyzing the city organizations, develop our staffing forecasts, our departmental space needs, what our existing facilities are and what capabilities we presently have, and also conceptual facility plans with proposed options and a cost estimate for those options. The staffing trends, as you might expect over time, it is expected to increase. You can see this goes from 1993 to 2033. Just following the history that we've had. Population increases, so does the staff. Sorry about this particular slide. Extremely busy in your packet, but as you've probably already looked at this, it's quite interesting. It shows the forecasts per department and the different divisions as well as the space needs.
Dwight, excuse me, if I may, could you back up to the staffing and population to that graph? That is not the same graph that's on section 3, page 3. Is it supposed to be? Or even similar?
This particular graph was put together by the consultants purely for this presentation.
Which one?
Which one? What?
The one in the book or the one on the screen?
The one on the screen.
So why would it be different?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head here, Walter.
I mean,
It looks like page 2, actually, rather than page 3 is what it's, that's the same graph, isn't it? Well, they're
Well,
the one
no,
on
it's
three.
different, Dan.
Two's
You
of the
got
same.
Two only goes to
five
2013.
bars compared to 9, yeah. One thing that is kind of interesting, though, Dwight, on this page, the page that Walter's referring to, section 3 of page 3, it's got the population increase from 2013 to 2033. Whoever come up with this report is a 35% increase, when the prior 23 years we had 28.5. I don't know how they got another 7.5% or 6.5% in 3 less years. I mean, that was a little bit confusing to me how they came up with those numbers. But
And they also have the chart legends switched, where this one shows the bars as being population. but
That's
in the
why it's
book-
different,
Is
Walter.
that why it's different?
That's why it's
But in the
different.
book, it's the line that's the population. They are not maintaining consistency in their identification of the data on the graph.
Yeah, I see it now.
But the population's at 175 on the book,
But it's the purple line in the book, not the bars.
which takes you to 175 in
I don't know, looks right.
the book. Okay, population reading it. Oh, and they changed the scale, too. That's
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
It's not just the fact that the bar and the line are switched, the scale is switched.
Somebody needs to beat the consultants for detail attention. I think
This is the same information we've shown you for the last however many months. And,
The information's
but it's,
there.
And it's still not
there. Well, there's not been a problem with it from you before. So I did not look into this any further from the past
But
presentations either.
it's every time we look at it, we seem to find something else that's a little questionable. I think I understand why the two are different. I think I'd have to really work at it to confirm that the data is correct on both, but the scale is different, and what's represented by the bars and the lines are different. But when you put it, when whoever puts it in the book in one fashion, and then it's put up on the screen totally in a different fashion, I'm not going to apologize for questioning it.
No. Well,
Thank you.
go ahead and continue, Dwight.
Okay, here you can see the building inventory and how that's broken out. Has the administrative and general government, the operating and infrastructure, community facilities, public safety, and parks and recreation. And here is your efficiency scales. You can see used and unused ratios within the different areas. Questions on that? Okay. Using the existing building inventory, you have your deficits going out to 2033. The slide shows the building square footage needs by function. As you can see by the color codes there, how that's broken out, and it goes out to 2033 as well. General government basically does increase, but just barely. The recreation, building and grounds remains pretty close to the same, but public works and public safety increase. And this slide just shows the difference of where we're at now, where we would be in 2033, and any deficiencies, and what kind, the percentage of change that would need to take place to bring us up to where we need to be at that point. And we have two slides here with the primary areas with the pros and cons of what's there now. Of course, the police station, the pros being the location, it's owned by the city. It could possibly be more efficiently developed, and more opportunity for swing space. Of course, there are cons. There's limited parking there. It's an aged infrastructure and no expansion options. It might be better for commercial activities, and it's an inefficient layout. City Hall, one of the changes to this document from last Friday is the focus is on, for one of the options, is on the basement. But the building itself, the pros, it's a historic building. Its proximity to downtown is really good. Space utilization could be enhanced, as we are presently doing on the third floor now. Substantial site for annex and is established downtown location. Everybody knows where it's at. The cons to it is, like with most things down here, there's limited parking. It's aged infrastructure, expensive remodeling, and displacement during construction and code compliance issues. It's an older facility, and a poor net gross ratio. City shops, if you've been down there, it's really obvious when you get there. The pros is a significant site, but it has lots of redevelopment options there. The cons is the facility is in poor condition. It's limited expansion options for extending buildings and code compliance issues. The Mann building, of course, the pros to this is its downtown location, just like City Hall, proximity to City Hall, established location, and substantial site for annex. And the cons, limited parking, aged infrastructure. You see some of these same issues everywhere. Expensive remodeling and displacement during any construction. And the Magyar building, of course, we rent that or lease it. The pros to it, it's adjacent to the water, proximity to downtown, and it's ideal for commercial use. But the cons to that, has poor interior utilization, limited expansion options, aged infrastructure, does not need to have significant visibility, location adjacent to the wellheads, and minimal parking and poor net to gross ratio. And those considerations were taken into account to come up with our proposed solution and phasing plan. The first one is to construct a new police facility. Still to be determined is the location, and possibly vacate the existing police station. Phase 2 would be, or option 2 would be, build a new office annex at city shops, and we have a couple of options for that. Construct a new office building at the Mann site, or man building, and also remodel the city hall basement. On phase 2 for the shop area, you can see basically work off of what we have now and build some new facility with it. And option 2 would be to basically raise what we presently have for the main building and start anew. For the man building, and this was one of the primary changes that we made from last week, we had the ratio, or I shouldn't say we, I had the ratio of the footprint incorrect. This is more appropriate, and basically it has a basement and 2 floors above that. Basement would hold storage, mechanical and support. Second floor and third floor would hold engineering and community development. Total of this would be 15,660 square feet. And with this change that we made, of course, you save a whole lot of the parking lot, and it's also a lot cheaper.
What was the former price, Dwight? I don't have the, do you remember?
Do you remember? I don't have that with me. There's a couple.
I believe it was 5.7 million
5 points, so that sounds right.
For the
For the man building.
for the
Man building
for the
replacement?
33,000 square foot building, correct.
And City Hall basement, basically remodeling the downstairs basement to hold information systems and human resources. There's some storage in there, as well as some of the IS equipment areas. And with those 4 phases, the cost, new police facility, the estimate was about $4.8 million. Option A, with the maintenance shop, that's using what's presently there and adding on, was a little over $7 million. Option B, starting anew, was $10.1 million. The man building was $3.6 million, and the remodel of the basement, it was $710,000. And depending on which option that we would go with, if you were using option A, would be 16.3 million. Option B would be 19.2 million.
So, you're talking, where is the water department gonna go?
to the city shops at our office building.
Okay. And then, we're talking about getting rid of the Magyar building, and then also, what are we doing with the current police station?
Well, based on this, the recommendation by the consultants was to
Vacate it.
vacate it, but we haven't
Sell it
gone
or-
any further than that. Be a lot of options for
Gary?
that.
Well, and this is a starting point.
Right.
It's a plan, it's something to steer toward. Circumstances will change, obviously, with a minimum amount of 16 million and maximum amount of 19 million. It's not something we're going to jump in and do right away.
Right.
Circumstances may change. We may be forced because of lack of resources or realignment of departments, that sort of thing, which may make that, if the police station, if it's relocated, that building would be available perhaps for some other city use. So again, I think as we move through this, we will reassess it at regular intervals as circumstances occur and be able to then make a decision then, what's the best move for the city.
So
John?
if we approve this, it's not cast in stone.
Not
Cast
at
in
all,
paper, John.
if I may. It's the same thing as the water comprehensive plan, sewer comprehensive plan, parks and rec master plan, so on and so forth. We're asking you to accept them, adopt them as planned. We will steer toward that, but every decision that will be made by the city council based on the resources that we have.
We have, Gary, I've talked to several counselors over this past week, and some of the some of the concerns is you have a plan like this, and then all of a sudden it becomes cast in stone with staff, and they think, well, this is the direction we're headed. Well, maybe and it may not be. Is we have our major challenge areas. We all know that the police department is something we're looking at is going to be the first thing we tackle as we're going along, and we don't know how long that's going to take us to get. And all of these are phases. Who knows how long it will take for all this stuff to develop? A very good chance is none of us are here when that in the end game, really. So, but your concern, John, is legitimate, Gary.
Yeah, and again, I know I've talked about the strategic plan a lot over the last year, but in order to make decisions for the entire city operations, you need to know what the plan is for each phase, water, sewer, you name it. This gives you the opportunity to get all those together. And is the price tag huge? Exactly, it is huge. But you're going to have to prioritize and use your finite resources where you can. So, John, it's not like this is never going to change. Obviously, it's going to change. We would burn up almost all of our GO bond capacity just on the facilities plan and leave nothing for parks, nothing for streets or any of that if we did that. So it's just unrealistic.
Okay.
Walter.
Thank you, sir. Dwight, you didn't mention on page 4, section 4, page 1, the fact that phase 3 description is the old one for the man building work.
Correct.
And was not updated to fit the new picture.
Correct.
Gary, we need to get a corrected page, please, for that, with that phase 3 paragraph restated, please.
What, that was section 4, page 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It still talks about a 33,800 two-story building.
Yeah, the picture later in that section is the picture Dwight had up on the
Yeah, I
board.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Jim, you had a...
Yeah, we had the right information sent, it just didn't come back the same way we sent it, sorry. Didn't catch it.
Dwight, when you put up there the pros and cons of the water, where the water department is at night, and being close to the wellhead is a con, why would the water department being close to the wellhead be a negative?
Well, you're talking the
Convenient.
building itself, they don't have any expansion options, any construction options, because the wellheads are there.
They
Can't do
couldn't put
anything with the building
well.
because there's an obstacle.
I thought it was interesting.
Wells are the obstacle.
It's a pro because it's close to water, but it's a con because it's close to the wellhead. It's like, okay.
It does sound kind of funny, but there you have it.
But if let's say for instance you could the guy that owns that building now wanted to give it to us and we could scrape it off and use that space and it would be convenient to the wellheads, then it would be a positive thing in that context, would it not?
The only reason that they had that down as a con was if you wanted to expand the building, you have wellheads in the way.
Oh, I see.
That's the only reason.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
Other than going up.
Yeah.
Other than going.
I think Les might be able to expand upon whether or not you need water offices or not next to a wellhead water treatment plant building.
You want to take a
Any
stab at it,
comment,
Les?
Les?
Yes, certainly. It's not a requirement. We have wells throughout the city, and obviously they're distant from the offices of the staff. Having wells 2 and 3 close by are convenient from that perspective. Probably what would be more important would be having the ability to have staff at the treatment facility, which is also at that location for the water treatment side. But again, if they have to travel from the shop site to that site throughout the day to check on that facility, that's not really a problem either. It runs pretty independently. So yeah, the issue really was that if you wanted to use that land and reconfigure buildings or build new structures or somehow modify or enlarge them, the wells themselves get in the way of that process.
Mr. Mayor?
Walter?
If I may, the reason I caught the difference in the two graphs was that I'd been looking at the one on section 3, page 3, and while I will vote to approve this plan subject to John's questioning and comments regarding stone, and Gary's reaction to it. I have a problem with and you can dispute whether or not the population increase is the correct percentage or not. I mean, it's a guess, hopefully an educated one. But when you take the population up 35% by 2033, and then show a staff increase of 52%, and then you show facility space increases of 77%, 78%, 88%, and 350%, I feel like the tail may be wagging the dog or something. I'm not sure what the correct analogy is, but I hear staff and I hear council people talk about demands for more services. I don't hear that much in terms of citizens demanding more services. We did get a citizen demand for more playfields, which we've already had spoken about tonight. We reacted to it. We did something about it. And the only person probably that wants to see kids out there playing on that more than Dan Carscallon is myself. So we do react when we get specific, legitimate demands for services by citizens that we can find a way to fund and accomplish. But I just don't see that we're getting constant demands for gimme, 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 and staff is trying to figure out how to accomplish all of that, and we're expected to find the money to pay for it, and in order to do all that, we've got to grow all these buildings as much as we do. So that's a little bit of a disconnect that I've got with the document. Just one last thing, Wayne. Possibly, just an idea to throw out there, Gary, so somebody can think about it when the time comes. If the police station present building were abandoned because they moved to a new facility, maybe that's a water and sewer office building and don't have to build a new one out at the city shops. I don't know. There would be questions for Les and staff about, is it convenient, good place, bad place, does it work, won't it work, but just something to throw out there.
Wayne?
I share a little bit of your concern, Walter, when we talk about demands for services. However, and I agree that citizens of Moscow are not demanding more services. But at the same time, they do demand things. They demanded ball fields. They wanted ball fields for 10 years before we finally got them ball fields. But we figured out a way to do it, or more. This, and the speculation on the population, and the speculation on what services we're going to provide, and the speculation on how many employees we're going to have is strictly that. It's speculation. This is not a lot different than trying to put together a long range budget. It's the best guess with the best tools that we have at the time, and it continues to be a living document that's open for change. There's a lot of problems in this, and I debated myself as an outgoing council member whether I should even vote on this or how I should vote on it, therefore obligating future councils to this particular plan. But as John expressed concern and Gary responded, that it is a living document, that it's up for challenge and it's up for change, and the council ultimately controls it. The council controls everything because they control the money.
With that, Wayne.
And with that, I would make a motion to accept the City of Moscow Facilities Master Plan 2015.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
I'll let John second it.
Okay.
Somebody else wants to.
John, you got the second. One point I wanted to make before I call for a roll on the vote, Wayne, is as councils go along on the strategic planning and priority-based budgeting that we're doing, that's not going to go away. And things of this nature will be stuff that will get caught up in those major challenge areas as deemed by whoever the present-day council is. Mm-hmm. And so I think adapting this plan is a go-ahead and is a smart thing to do, because councils will, with the strategic planning and how we're going to implement it as time goes along, whether it's this present-day body or a future body, should be able to see fit to get through based on whatever they've got for budget and bond capacity and so on and so forth. So with that, we've got a motion by Wayne and a second by John to accept the City of Moscow's Facility Master Plan of 2015. I'll start to roll you, John.
Excuse me, aye.
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 And I,
Okay, and we'll move forward. Thank you, Dwight. Thank you very much.
do you want to take these to change that
If
page?
we could, yeah, we can just collect them after, and then we'll get these changed.
Dwight doesn't
So
need to
they'll be
pick them up. We'll
accepted
just run them through Lori and she can just ban them wherever
We'll
she-
get them to you this coming week.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to reports. That's the end of our normal stuff, and I will start with you, Wayne, being you're in Public Works.
Well, I've just taken a look at what we had on the Public Works and Finance agenda, and we covered everything tonight. It was either through consent agenda or through our regular agenda. And so there's nothing else to report on that. As far as other meetings that I've had, let's take a look. Only had one meeting, and that was Historical Preservation Commission. And the Latah County Board of Realtors has offered a donation to the City Parks and Recreation, and there was a discussion centered around new benches in front of City Hall. In fact, Dwight Curtis was there and kind of led that discussion. What kind of benches would be appropriate for City Hall. And there was also a discussion about, Lisa Anderson, in fact, presented a concept drawings for a bike shelter at City Hall, and it'd be manufactured by the same company that's been building our bus shelters for our pedestrian bus shelters. It would be located on Washington Street, and the commission was pretty much agreeable that it looked okay. It wouldn't detract from the historical lines of City Hall. That's just about it. They continue to work towards acceptance of the Fort Russell expansion, and the discussion that they're having, I'm pretty proud of them for having this discussion, because there's some philosophical things that they have to decide as far as if a home actually falls within the proper guidelines to be in the historical preservation district, in the Russell district. It has to have been built before 1940, but it has to do with the modifications on that home. As an example, one of the buildings that is not within the Fort Russell district, it sits geographically in it, but it's not counted as part of it, is the McConnell Mansion, believe it or not. And the problem with the McConnell Mansion is it has metal siding on it. Okay, so the question, does that cause it to be non-conforming, so it can't be included it's on the historical register, but it can't be included in the district. So if they make an exception for that, suppose somebody has another house that they re-sided it with very similar vinyl siding that looks very similar to what was originally on it, but it's not the original stuff. So they're working their way through these questions, and once they're done, they're going to have a real good package to put together. And that's all I have.
Okay, Jim.
Let's see. Last Tuesday, the Pathways Commission met, and there was a discussion. Resident Suvia Judd made a presentation about the restoration of the Berman Creekside Park, and she kind of got in hot water there with some of her comments. And I want to commend Mr. Curtis for handling that in the most diplomatic and professional way that could possibly have been done. And we got that resolved, I think, pretty well, and there's going to be some action taken towards restoring the gardens over there with the available funding and the available volunteer resources. Mr. McDonald was there as well, and is coordinating with the Transportation Commission and the pathways on the signage, the wayfinding signage for the bike paths through the city to coordinate things that are on the streets with the pathways that are not vehicle friendly, and I think we're making a lot of progress there. Les is doing a great job with that, of getting the signs together and coordinating with transportation and pathways to get the signs to have the information that we need without them being too large or too busy. So we're making a lot of progress there. And that's kind of the crux of what went on at the Transportation Commission on Thursday as well. Les had his maps out with all the signage and where it would be, and there was further discussion, and it's been refined even more. And I I think we'll have signs up there before long showing where all the important locations are in town and how long it takes to get there, and on foot or on a bicycle, and it'll be a big improvement in the human-powered transportation infrastructure in Moscow. Also on Thursday, the Clearwater Resource Conservation and Development Council met, and the crux of that was there was a presentation of the video from the Youth Conservation Corps, Clearwater Youth Conservation Corps, which I distributed to everybody. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at that, but that's well worth the time of looking at that video. That's a program that is showing a lot of kids pathways to careers in natural resources in the communities that they come from in Idaho, and probably is helpful in enhancing enrollment at the University of Idaho. So if you guys get a chance to look at that video, I recommend that.
I saw that video today a few times. Jim was pretty terrific. I liked it very much.
Thank you. And that's all the meetings I went to.
John?
Well, the Urban Renewal has postponed the meeting until the 7th of January, so there was not anything having to do with that. And the Planning and Zoning Commission met, and they had a Conservation Social Sciences class project, and it had to do with growth and development. It was a good presentation, but it didn't give any more information than we got from our own survey that we had done and we've gone through recently. And then the other thing that was discussed was the relevant criteria and standards for planned unit development, and we are going through all of the various parts of the city code having to do with building and development, and that was just one more part of it, and it will eventually end up in front of the council. And then the never can remember the committee.
Human rights.
Thank you, Bill. Human rights, I think it's tomorrow.
Dan?
The only commission I had that met, holidays everybody kind of takes a break from them, but the Arts Commission met. The big news in that one and the big discussion was about the recent 30-30-30 sale and planning for the next year. There was a lot of discussion. I think some artists wanted more for their art, but it kind of detracts away from bringing in the new people, the new artists, and that was the big thing that people wanted to continue to do, was to get the new people in there. They also talked about how people are doing 30 works of art, and some of them have kind of a theme. Well, to keep somebody from going along the wall and just peeling off everybody's, that one artist, all their works, and getting them all, they kind of spread them around throughout the system. So there's a lot of discussion about how that might change in the next couple of years, and it's kind of fun to watch how serious people get about their art, and that's neat to see. And of course, I got to ring the bell and tried to get out of the way. I almost got run over by Mary Steed as she ran up the stairs to get.
She could take you out, man.
I think she could. She could have that day. So, but yeah, it's fun to watch that process when that thing takes off. So I hope it continues as it does, because I think it's just one of the neat things about that the Arts Commission puts on. So, and that's all I got.
Art? Mine was easy. The URA got postponed, Sustainable Environment got canceled, Fair and Affordable Housing got canceled. Done.
Okay, we'll move right on to Walter then.
PBAC got canceled. No December meeting for PBAC this past week. However, the Campus Community Coalition on Drug and Alcohol Use did meet on the 9th. Further discussion about trying to learn what some of the rules, regulations, who's responsible, whether it's state, county, city, or nobody, for various and sundry ways to obtain alcohol in the community are. We did a little research on whether or not you can make a phone call and have alcohol delivered to your house. If anybody knows a way you can do that, let me know, because I haven't been able to find it. The mayor assures me that Safeway won't do it, and Rosehurst did the same thing. So we were doing a little more research on that. Did attend the fire department board meeting on Monday night, the 14th. Nothing extraordinary there. They put in 3 new members, if I remember correctly, continually adding to hold up their 100 volunteer staffing, which works out really well. Attended the Russell School caroling downstairs on the first floor on last Friday, along with the mayor, who probably will have something to say about it. We need a bigger space, Gary. I don't want to build a bigger building, don't misunderstand me, but a lot of kids packed in down there. They were hanging off the rafters, man.
Actually, it's kind of nice to have
Did you get a count? How many were
I
there?
don't have any idea. There was too many of them. Boy, there were,
I think, I accused some of them of circling the building and coming back for a second cookie, because they just kept coming. There wasn't any end to it. And they were all just excited and fired up and had a great time, and were extremely polite. I got a lot of Merry Christmases and thank yous. And when they wanted to know what the R on the cookies was, I assured them it was not for Russell, it was for Rudolph. So, there.
okay, and with that, I had an airport board meeting on December 9th. We talked about the usual things. And as Walter said, December 18th, we had the carolers from Russell School, and that was a fun time. And Walter was one of the handlers of cookies given out to these kids at 10 in the morning so that they could get sugared up and really hit it. And I thought that I talked to some of the teachers, and I can't imagine having to, well, here it is, the last day of school for those kids, and they got to go all day, and, you know, thinking about Christmas and things, oh my God, you know, they had to be hyper and having a good time, so.
Wired.
Yeah, but anyway, it was a neat time, and there was, as Walter said, there was kids there where I got no clue how many of them were here, but there was a bunch. And with that, this is our last meeting of 2015, and I just want to wish everybody happy holidays for the city. Staff did a wonderful job. And it's been a good year for all of us. With that, Gary, turn over to you.
On behalf of the employees, I'd just like to thank the council. Good to see a lot of you at our holiday potluck last Friday. Great time was had by all, and we'll do it again next year. See you in 2016.
Oh, and with that, I will make an announcement. We will not adjourn to executive session tonight. We will not have one, but I would sure entertain a motion to adjourn.
Consider yourself entertained.
Ann made the motion.
Second?
Wayne second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are out here, folks. 8:17.